I suppose one of the other points that we should also mention here is the costs of home ownership, which are ever increasing.
That's right. That's also
taxes and
that's also off-putting for homeowners. It's a deterrent for young people now to add extra burden on themselves. Whereby, I mean, property taxes being introduced this year is going to be an added financial burden on people. The abolishment of mortgage interest relief, it's becoming a much more costly exercise to become a homeowner now. Yeah. So couple that with the unpredictability of the market
and the non-availability of mortgages,
of job.
Yeah. So it looks like the strength in the tenancy market is going, in the rental market is going to continue for the foreseeable future, it would seem.
Yes, as I said, I see a sizable shift in the whole behavioural pattern of the residential sector here in Ireland. People will be viewing a rental option as a much longer term, or taking a much longer term view for rental options. People are going to be starting families in rental options as opposed to buying a property. If they start families, they're going to be restricted to where they can live once they get their children into local schools. People don't really want to move out of that environment, so they'll be looking for security in their rental options. And I can see a sizable shift in the pattern of how society behaves in that respect. Right.
Well, I suppose as tenancy managers, that has it has a big impact on our business, and I suppose just to give an overview of that and how we think the effects of having tenants in a property on a longer term basis. What are the sort of knock-on effects? I mean, we talked about the diminishing stock, so that's going to obviously have an impact on rent values, which is a good thing for landlords. What we're seeing is now in the tenancy management side of things is that there's very little turnaround. I mean, before you would have a lease of 12 months, 2 years maximum. Now we're seeing 3, 4 and 5 years. So, I mean, that's good for landlords, and the positive aspects would be that the longevity of tenancies is a positive,
of course,
and a negative. But the positives would be, I suppose,
a continuous tenancy over a long period of time will be beneficial to the landlord insofar as they won't be changing tenants every year or every 18 months or 2 years as such, so they won't have the added overhead of I would say a letting fee or marketing costs of trying to source a new tenant. Also, you would find that in our experience, we find that there are less maintenance costs to landlords if they're dealing with fewer tenants. If a landlord is dealing with multiple tenancies over, would say, a 3 or 4 year period, invariably their overheads in terms of maintenance and upkeep of the property tend to be greater than if there's a continuous one tenant scenario in that time frame. And
I suppose the relationship, I think it's
very important element is to maintain is to establish and maintain good relations with a tenant. Good tenants experiencing good relations with the landlord will reciprocate in terms of upkeep and maintenance of the property.
Sure, and renewing, staying on and in the property. And
true, but the flip side of that for landlords is that in a market where rents are rising, landlords may well expect to get an increase in rental every year. The level of that increase would certainly be restricted if they're dealing with an existing tenant. Invariably, for landlords to retain good tenants, they may need to be careful in terms of how they increase the rent or by how much they increase the rent. Whereas if a landlord was to let a property 3 or 4 years in the trot and rising market, they may see quite a significant difference in the rental income they can get over that period. But then again, they're bringing all in the added costs as well. So it's a question of evaluating the quality and the benefit of your existing tenant.
Sure. And I suppose there are always negatives, or not negatives, but there are downsides in that. Obviously for the landlord, there's maintenance issues, like tenants in when they're in properties for a long period of time and treating it like home, they have high expectations.
Certainly,
and from a maintenance perspective, and we're finding it in the property management and the maintenance side of things, that if an appliance breaks down, the washing machine breaks down, there's an electrical problem, a heating problem, tenants, this is home for them, and they want it fixed, and they want it fixed now. I mean, the tenants have high expectations.
Absolutely, and not only do tenants have high expectations, landlords have obligations to their tenants as well. There's a very clear set of housing regulations which clearly sets out what landlords' obligations are towards their tenants and towards tenancies. Other, legislative changes like the Residential Tenancies Act of 2004, and certain amendments that have been applied in recent years, such as the PRTB, the BER. These are not only additional costs on the landlord, but there are very strict guidelines and obligations set out within these. So tenants, they want value for money. They want specifications, quality of properties and specifications of properties to be what they would be akin to living in should they own the home themselves. So there's certainly added pressure on landlords to maintain and upkeep standards.
You mentioned the BER there, and I can see that there's going to be huge impact on this whole BER as time goes on. I mean, already it's statutory that a BER rating has to be affixed to a property before it can be advertised now.
That's right.
And any existing tenancies are also are required to have a BER. So that is going to, the rating of a property, that is going to have a huge impact for landlords and letting down.
Well, it will, and the reason why is that even though tenants, over the last couple of years have been, a bit nonchalant, let's say, about the BER, not paying much credence to it. It was all about where the property is, how much the rent is, etc. But with increasing utility bills and overheads for tenants also, tenants are taking a very careful look at the BER rating or certification of a property. And if it's a low rating, it means it's going to be, a more expensive property to heat or to run. And that will certainly affect how efficiently a property lets, what kind of rent the property can command, and how quickly it lets. Or what kind of calibre tenant you attract.
And it's clear that I believe the tenancies are going to continue into the future, and that people are going to rent rather than buy in Ireland for the foreseeable. And
I see a marked shift in the trends and patterns in the private rented sector. In fact, I can see Ireland going more towards the European model, where the young generation and following generations won't be as tied to the land as maybe we and our forebears were. They'll be a lot more flexible in their attitudes, I think. They will look to the rented sector as long-term accommodation solution. And I think, landlords need to adjust their thinking in that respect, and landlords can certainly benefit from this. But I think also there will be a need for further legislative change, to accommodate this trend as it grows.
And I suppose we'll see that happening as time goes on. But
I hope so. It will be required, but government could be slow sometimes to react, and there have been a lot of good legislative changes in the market in recent years. There has been some positive impact and some negative impacts of those, but I think overall, if the correct changes are implemented, it could be a very healthy private rented sector. And take a lot of pressure off people.
Okay, so I suppose to summarise, Rich, how do you see this affecting property owners and landlords just in the immediate term, and what advice would we give to landlords out there?
Well, look, landlords invariably are investors by nature, and there's a bottom line requirement. They need their assets to perform and to show a profitable return. So it's all about this whole industry and sector is about landlords maximising the return from their assets. That means keeping overheads as low as possible and keeping income as high as possible. That's where we come in. That's where we specialise in tenancy care and management, and that's where landlords have to move. They have to move into that sphere now of tending to their tenancies more carefully, keeping good record keeping, keeping up good strong inventories, condition statements on properties,
property inspections,
absolutely regular inspections on
security
properties,
deposit refunding,
handling security deposits properly, invariably establishing a good relationship and bond effectively with their tenant. If their tenants are most likely going to be longer term, to establish good relations and maintain those good relations, that will ultimately benefit the landlords. It will help keep their overheads down and see an increase in their returns. Ultimately, as we've always maintained, Breed, a happy tenant equals a happy landlord.
Okay, well look, I think we'll leave it there for now. We've only scratched the surface of a vast topic. I'm sure there's an awful lot more that we could
certainly we could wax lyrical for hours, but look, feel free to contact us anytime if you want any specific details on any specific topic. You can contact us by email at info@christiespmp.com, Our telephone 01 667 0099 and speak to Breed, myself or any one of our team.
Thank you for watching.
Take care.